As mentioned, Dr. Mitchell Harrop from the University of Melbourne, a strange person who is both a computer scientist and a honorary historian. But that's a complicated story about how that came about. I'm going to be talking to you today about an urban history kind of project, mapping Digital Shillong. And unfortunately, Professor Andy May couldn't be here today because he is either on the plane or just getting off the plane to do the visit that's associated with this project. So I've come along to do this this presentation. So I'll be talking more about the technical side of the project, but do my best to explain the actual the meat of the project. We've got a big cast of characters from different institutions, which causes its own challenges, and also outside of academia, so documentary makers and so on. So the previous research project that this came out of was a project by Andy May with. Oh, sorry. This I'll start with this research project. So we're basically trying to make a local sort of encyclopedia for Shillong, and we've previously made a local encyclopedia for Melbourne. So we want to do this kind of project again, but with more community contribution, right? And source stories about local history from locals, amateur historians as well as professional historians. Deal with the issues of distributed authorship and contested stories to put up online to be a useful understanding of place. So that's the project in broad strokes. We've also done this sort of community contribution before at the start of COVID. With some colleagues over in the United States who very quickly put together an Ameka site to collect information about people's experiences of COVID and going into lockdown, and try to collect things as they were happening. And so we did the Australian branch of that, and I in particular worked on getting a lot of the mapping features working and being able to easily get people to put pins on maps and tell their stories and upload their photographs of things as they were happening. I'm also working on at the moment another project, again tangential to this, but it has a strong mapping component, so we've been able to reuse some of the lessons from that. tlcmap.org. So this is a now series of Australian Research Council grants for, and I'm struggling to remember the acronym for LEAF, linkage, infrastructure, other things, if anyone can help me out. But national infrastructure for doing mapping that we've been working on for a few years now. The main interesting part of this is the Gazetteer of Australian Place Names. So not necessarily just places that you would find on Google Maps, so the names of restaurants and so on, but things like Makeout Point, that the locals knew that particular lake or whatever by this particular name from this time period to that time period, or older names for things. So in Melbourne, I'm old enough to still call it Spencer Street Station, but I should be calling it Southern Cross Station, and recording when that name change happened and why people my age and older will still refer to it by its old name. Having that as a database that is searchable and helps you be able to put things maps, not just relying on Google, but also a platform of metrics and so on. So you're working on these different kind of threads of projects that have come together for this. Previous to the funding that directly relates to the Unnati scheme was Andy's project from the British Library. So the British Library had a funding scheme for endangered archives projects, which hit COVID lockdowns. So it was about digitizing and recording things, oral histories, etc., from the Khasi Hills. Not being able to leave his own city kind of impacted that a little bit for Andy. So this project is a sort of successor of that. That a lot of the materials that this project was able to gather is things that will also go up onto the our online encyclopedia. There was also a visiting fellowship that led to this. Yeah. So and I think that some of the frustrations of this and trying to work in official archives also lends itself to why we're doing the more crowdsourcing aspect of this and asking locals for their stories and contributions. So we've been collecting a lot of information. We've been getting information out of the Thacker directories, so street directories of the area, and mapping those and getting a system up for handling the mapping and overlay of historical maps over each other and over the top of contemporary maps. And we're sort of moving into the augmentation phase where we have the raw materials and we want to link them together and say this is the same thing, and layer the information. And our user testing is sort of ongoing because we've got this crowdsourced kind of contribution thing. We've done our soft launch of that and learned a lot of lessons about making sure that it's all very mobile accessible and having two different streams of the community contributions to our encyclopedia. So having just a very simple upload a picture, tell us about it, or put a pin on a map and tell us about it, versus the more advanced contribution of give us lots of information and pinpoint everything and tell us everything about you and your story. So that'll be ongoing sort of refinement. So I mentioned doing things with old maps, right? Old maps are not necessarily 100% to scale, and a lot more. That happens a lot more than you would think. So you get things like global maps where Europe is larger than it actually is, so that one, colonialism, but two, being able to actually read all the European countries, right? So you even get that sort of thing happening in local maps, right? Of the detail of the central business district being a little bit larger, and perhaps the fringe areas or forest being squished up a little bit in the map. So we've been doing work to geo-rectify the maps, which is the process of rubber sheeting. So you find and you do the history work to work out what are places on an old map that are still there or in a known location at some point, and get an even spread of that so you can stretch and shrink the map for eventually being able to put the historical maps all on top of each other and do that sort of swipe visualization of show and hide the contemporary thing so that people can see things. So we've done a lot of that work. Beyond just the liberties that are taken with those who are creating the maps. So even when you have something very official done by surveyors who really, really care about things, you still get warping in the actual document itself and creases and so on that you can iron out digitally. We've also done this sort of work before with Melbourne. So an extreme example here with the with the public transport, where public transport maps are not drawn to scale. They're drawn so that stations are equally spaced out. But we've taken old contour maps of Melbourne and put them over, and just with some 3D buildings for fun, to see how the landscape of Melbourne has changed over time, and why it all used to flood down to Elizabeth Street. So applying those sort of lessons that we learned through doing that again, we've also had parallels with our sort of primary sources from directories. So there's Thacker's Indian directories, which are sort of, and Melbourne's SANS and later SANS and McDougall directories, which are your phone book precursors. So no phone numbers in them, but still that street by street, place by place, who was where, and what was going on there. And we're sort of using this as our scaffolding for the encyclopedia entries. So before we start getting the stories from people from the community and oral history stuff and all that sort of interesting stuff, we want to have the scaffolding there from the directories to be like, at least we can say some things about each particular place and each particular road, and then build up from there. So it isn't a sort of ghost town, an online ghost town, as opposed to the very busy actual town. So again, reusing our lessons in that sort of information extraction from directories, and using the, what subtle indents in the text mean, and being able to train up that. So that sort of all leads into this point about it's sort of parallel projects that we've got a lot of people who are interested in local history, urban history, right? And it's the same project in a different location and wanting to use the same sort of processes and doing the same sort of thing, right? That we have, Encyclopedia of Melbourne, and now our lovely Mecca site, the Shillong Digital Archives directory. So it's all sort of the small projects that build on each other and come together, and that's the sort of mentality that we use. We're very much prototypers, right? What's the little small thing that we can do and achieve that will help out all of the projects, right? That, okay, now we've got our nice just drop a pin interface for contributing, so we can use that again for when we do something different with eMelbourne or with another city somewhere. Cool. In terms of bilateral collaborations and partnerships, I can't really speak to the part of the project of like, how do we get the funds to our Indian collaborators to do this part of the on the ground sort of research, and the Henry has largely been dealing with that. But I can say that it'll definitely be easier for the next person that tries to do the same sort of thing. I can speak a bit to the technology part of it, right? And that collaborations within institutions are easy because this university has a SharePoint site that we've all got logins to. Collaborations across universities are a bit harder. You can use the national infrastructure that sometimes works and sometimes disappears. Collaborations across institutions is harder still, and especially they'll have a separate, not unified education login or just their Gmail account or so on. And then collaborations across institutions across countries is harder still. So we've very much been sort of push towards using a hodgepodge of different third-party platforms, right, that everyone can sign up for and get an account on, and learn a bunch of lessons there. Future directions, we're going to keep building. We want to get more contributions, and then when we sort of have the peak level contributions, we've then got it all set up to pull out that lovely linked open data and make the aforementioned mapping interface of it. Also apply our fancy AI techniques to the natural language kind of contributions and mapping information coming out of plain language, so named entity recognition, etc. So getting that up as a prototype fairly soon, and then thinking about, you know, extending this to any place, and sharing the lessons between different projects.
Thanks.
So I think I'll stop there. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Mitchell. That's so rich, and it's so exciting that you're doing this work. As someone who does this sort of work as a geographer, environmental historian, it's absolutely, you know, wonderful. And I can see one of the attendees is called, you know, said it's pure gold for human geographers, and it's absolutely right.